Hello from me and my creaky chair. Right, today I thought I would share with you 3 things that I've learnt since reopening my Etsy shop a year ago. Just to recap, I did actually start my shop way back in 2007. So that would make it about 15 years old, and I've been doing it as a business for the past 9 years, 9.5 years, a long time. But when the whole Rona thing kicked off, I closed the shop because I thought it would only be for a little while and it would be a nice little holiday. And then a year and a half later, I thought, ooh, I should probably get back to it now. So 1st of July 2021, I finally reopened the shop. That was a year ago. Wow, so much changed. Which leads me to the first thing that I have learnt over the past year. The Etsy that I left when I switched on vacation mode back in March of 2020 is not the same Etsy that I came back to, not by a long shot. For a start, it's busier. At the end of 2019, there were about 2.6 million sellers on the platform, and I can remember people were complaining then that it was a saturated marketplace. By the end of 2021, there were 7.5 million sellers on the platform. We're in 2022, so I don't even know how many sellers are on the platform right now, but I'm guessing it's more than 7.5 million. So yeah, it's busy. Before anybody starts thinking that that's a con, like a bad thing, there's also a flip side to that. Yes, the sellers have hugely increased, but so have the buyers. Swings and roundabouts. Okay, this one is a bit more controversial. I'm not really sure why. It's the truth. Etsy is less of a handmade marketplace now. It has been for a very long time. However, the last year or so has just taken that fact and it's skyrocketed it. For example, one of the things that Etsy do not allow on their platform are resellers. They don't like people reselling. Okay, so there are 3 main categories on Etsy: handmade, vintage, and supplies. You can resell in the supplies category, and vintage isn't reselling, it's its own category all of its own. Providing something is 20 years old or older, it counts as vintage. Otherwise, everything in the handmade category should be, by its very definition, handmade. And Etsy even break down their definition of handmade. Print on demand and digital products are included in handmade, providing you have designed the product yourself, which goes without saying. All very good, all very nice. However, the handmade category is awash with people who are reselling mass-produced items and marking them as handmade. What we see now, though, is insane because it's starting to make Etsy look more like eBay or Amazon, which is fine. It's not fine. It's not. I'm trying to be diplomatic. It's a pain in the neck. It's a pain in the neck. There's nothing wrong with there being mass-produced stuff on the platform in the right categories and the right context. So if you're selling, for example, beads to make necklaces in the supplies category, all well and good. But if you are selling, well, I did the video on it, didn't I? If you're selling a shelf that you got from B&M and you're sticking it in the handmade category, that's not okay. Don't do that. Okay, and the second thing that I've learned over the last year of having my shop reopened, and this is more of a personal one, I think, it's that collection drops don't necessarily work for me. Now, to give you some context, before I closed the shop, I used to drip feed my items in as and when they were ready. I hand make all of my items, so I can't do that thing where you batch create a lot of listings and then post one every single day. So I used to just post them as and when they were available and ready. And it worked out really well from the point of view of getting sales in and keeping the shop stocked, but it was a bit of a nightmare for marketing the items because it just felt like I was constantly going, I have a thing, I have a thing, I have a thing, I have another thing and another thing. So I thought I would change things up this time and try and launch collections instead. From a marketing point of view, it's amazing. It's not only helps to keep people interested because they're not constantly being sold to, and it just builds excitement for those who are genuinely interested, but it also builds that excitement for me too. Unfortunately, that is where it ends. After that, it's all just a pain in the neck. I find it really, really difficult to stay organized and stay on track so that I can keep on releasing things on time, which is 2 to 3 months in advance, and I'm almost always late. And those of you who've been following me for a while will know that I will often say, launch date is this date. And then I'm like, no, it's not, it's this date now. And then I'm like, no, it's this date. It's hard. It's obviously something of a skill, and a skill that I have yet to crack, and I'm not sure that I particularly want to, because it's not necessarily working for me. Because what I have struggled with is keeping items in the shop in between launches. And we all know that Etsy like their recency, so it's really, really difficult to keep things ticking over when it's just a lot of nothing followed by a beep and then a lot of nothing. I also found that my SEO actually got worse launching collections, because I found that having to batch list a whole bunch of items meant that I had less time to research good keywords, and just even my listings, they suffered. That's a personal thing, not a general thing. I'll talk more about SEO in a minute. But I think for me personally, keeping on top of my SEO, keeping it tight and as high quality as possible, I found that easier as I was drip feeding items in instead of publishing a bunch of items all at once. Okay, and the last thing that I've learned over the past year is that SEO has completely, it's not even the same thing. What worked when I closed my shop in 2020 doesn't even work now. It's not even apples and oranges, it's more like apples and cars. Now, I have done a video completely dedicated to SEO and how it works now. I'll link to that at the end, but in a nutshell, before you had more control over where your item could show up, not necessarily rank. Nobody has control over exactly where an item ranks, but there was things that you could do that would have an impact. And so good, clever SEO did get you quite far. However, that's not to say that it doesn't now. It's definitely important, but we have less control, because it's not all down to the seller and the seller's shop and how it's optimized for SEO. That's part of it, it's half of it, and the other half is down to the buyer and buyer history, because Etsy take the two into consideration. So it's definitely not such a cut and dried, straightforward process anymore. So yes, when it comes to search, you kind of have to look at it from two angles: Etsy's search algorithm and the buyer. And it has muddied the waters a little bit, because I personally found it a lot easier just to sort of slip into one or the other. Whereas now I've got to sort of write my SEO and my descriptions and everything with these two things in mind. And like anything, I think with a little bit of practice, it's not hard. It's something we can go, oh, okay, actually this is quite easy. But because we've been doing it a certain way, we might have to remind ourselves for a little while that actually we have to write our descriptions and stuff for humans too, not just keyword stuff. I personally was never a fan of keyword stuffing, but I still see it. That's a nutshell description, but if you would like more information, then you can watch my SEO video here. It describes how it now works. So go and give that a watch if that's of interest to you, and I will see you there. For the rest of you, I will see you next week. Bye.